We'd like to welcome you and our live studio audience to the Atlanta Press Club Loudermilk Young Debate Series, originating from the studios of Georgia Public Broadcasting in Atlanta. This is the debate between the candidates for Georgia's governor. So let's meet the candidates. They are, in alphabetical order, Jason Carter, who has represented the 42nd Senate District in the Georgia State Legislature since 2010. Incumbent Nathan Deal has been the governor of Georgia since 2011. And Andrew Hunt is the founder and former CEO of a nanotechnology company. Now let's meet our panelists. Jim Galloway writes Political Insider, a political column for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Christopher King is a reporter with CBS 46 in Atlanta. And Sandra Parrish is a reporter for WSB Radio, covering political and legislative news. This debate will consist of 3 rounds, and for more information on the rules, please visit atlantapressclub.org. Now, let's get started. In the first round, each panelist will pose a question to one candidate. So, Sandra Parrish, you get the first question for Nathan Deal.
Mr. Deal, with Emory University and the CDC here in Atlanta putting Georgia in the spotlight in the outbreak with Ebola, today you signed an executive order to create an Ebola response team. Tell us exactly what that will entail, and does Georgia have a sufficiently funded public and private healthcare network in place to handle an Ebola outbreak?
Well, yes, this day I did issue an executive order, and we will be having the first meeting of an Ebola response team. It will consist of both public and private individuals, including Emory University, their staff that has the expertise of dealing with it. It will involve all of those agencies of our state. It will involve rural hospitals and others who may be first responders that might be associated with responding and identifying someone who is potentially infected with the virus. I believe that we do have the resources that are available, and if we need additional resources, we will try to make sure that those are available. We take this seriously. It is something that we want to be prepared for. We don't have control over travel restrictions. We have identified the counties in our state where individuals from the 3 primary countries are located that have come here. We're making arrangements for the travel season during the Christmas holidays to identify people such as students who may be going home to their home countries. We believe we will be prepared.
Christopher King, it is your turn now to ask a question of Andrew Hunt.
Mr. Hunt, you've said that you don't want to increase the minimum wage, but you don't want to encourage the creation of more low-paying jobs. You want to establish a plan for the state to reimburse employers for a federal payroll tax on every hire paid more than $11 an hour. Will that end up costing more money? Why not just raise the minimum wage?
Well, you need to have a system of freedom where there's the maximum liberty, and that's what we need to have, is a free enterprise system where the ways that people do business are regulated and directed towards the way of maximum productivity. But we need to have more jobs that bring our people out of poverty. We have one of the highest poverty ratings in the whole nation. We have to end that. We need higher paying jobs and full-time jobs. Too many people are having to work part-time jobs and are not making ends meet. We have had a decrease of $1,500 in the last 4 years of the average middle-class citizen in our state. We need to stop that and have higher paying jobs. And my program will bring that. We will go to less than 5% unemployment from being one of the highest unemployment states in the nation. We have to stop this, we have to correct it, and we need a strong plan that will do it. Mine is a very aggressive and strong plan that will get the job done.
And Jim Galloway, you may ask Jason Carter a question.
Mr. Carter, when you first arrived in the state Senate, you championed the idea of a $140,000 family eligibility cap for the Hope Scholarship. Last January, you told Atlanta Magazine that you were backing away from that idea, that an income tax was too blunt an instrument. You said the same thing earlier this month and have taken a few hits for it. My question simply is, should any kind of means testing be applied to the Hope Scholarship? And if so, how would it work?
Thank you for your question, Jim. Before we begin, I just want to take one moment to say that Anyone who's ever worked on a campaign knows how quickly the campaign becomes a family. And I recognize that the Deal campaign suffered a great loss this week, and just want to take a moment to acknowledge Mac Burgess and send condolences to his family. And my prayers are with both his family and Governor Deal's team. With respect to the Hope Scholarship, Jim, I have fought every day of my time in the state Senate against the governor's cuts. Those cuts were deep. They impacted the middle class. Today, there are 80,000 fewer Hope recipients than there were when the governor started. And I believe that those cuts were wrong. I fought against them, and I do believe that we must make sure that we're maximizing the number of students who are able to afford college. That's how we get the kind of economy that we want, and that's how we get the kind of people that are prosperous and moving forward that we want.
That concludes the first round of this debate. The candidates will now ask one question to each of their opponents. Each will have 30 seconds to ask the question, 60 seconds to respond, and 30 seconds for a rebuttal. So we begin with Andrew Hunt. Your question for Jason Carter.
No, I get to choose who I ask, right?
You get to ask a question of Jason Carter. All right, I'm told in my ear you do, in fact, get to choose.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Deal, sadly, a bottom 10 list. What we have is the highest unemployment rate. We have the high poverty in the nation, poor education, expensive health care, 9th highest income tax. You promised to cut to the income tax, the most corrupt state, high incarceration rates, $1,500 decrease in the income, terrible Atlanta traffic. You promised limited government, but tax revenues have actually increased by $2 billion during your term. You beautifully gloss over this, but can you acknowledge these facts?
I'll reject your facts. I think they are factually incorrect. First of all, family income, household income has increased in this state every year since I've been governor. We have been in the top 10 states in terms of job creation for the last 2 years. Last year, we were number 6 in the nation in terms of total new jobs, about 88,000 new jobs. We are seeing our state grow. We have grown in population by about 180,000 people. We've gone from the 10th largest state to the 8th largest state since I've been governor. We have been recognized for the first time in our history as the best state in the nation in which to do business. We are coming out of this great recession. We have seen revenues drop, but we're seeing revenues grow. We're almost back to pre-recession levels. They have grown every year under my administration. We believe we've set the course in the right direction. We have emphasized education. We have made reforms there, both at the K through 12 system level, as well as in our technical schools and our colleges and universities. We believe we've set a pattern that is very important for the future of our state.
Mr. Hunt, your rebuttal?
That was very, very smooth. And it's the way you would expect a lawyer to be able to answer a question. We need to take Georgia out of these ashes of destructions of bad policies and build them back up again. We need to end the reign of attorneys and career politicians in our government offices, because this is what we get. We get the smooth over, the paper-thin veneer. We need to, and we have to, make a change this year. We need to do it. You can do it. Tell other people. Hunt for Hunt on the ballot.
All right, Mr. Hunt, you don't get a pass because you still have to have a question for Jason Carter.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, Mr. Carter, once again, I'll come to the education policy and back to the realm of where we have the issue that you want to bring back our employment in our state through education. It takes many, many years for those people to graduate and many years to change out the teachers and the quality of the teachers like you proposed. I like some of your things, but it's not going to get us back to the job creation that we need so rapidly in our state. We're the highest unemployment, and we have to turn this around.
Thank you, Dr. Hunt. I do believe that to build a foundation for an economy and for a vibrant jobs-creating system, we do have to begin with education as the foundation. It allows us to have prosperous people. Our state has every ingredient that it needs to be an absolute powerhouse. We've got the educational institutions. We've got global access in our airport. We're going to have soon the biggest port on the East Coast. And with all of those dynamic, innovative people in the state, including not just in Atlanta, but in rural Georgia, and Columbus and Augusta and throughout the agriculture economy. We've got every ingredient that we need to be a powerhouse. And there is no excuse for us, given those ingredients, to be at the bottom, as you point out. We're dead last in unemployment, dead last in how fast we're recovering from the recession. What I believe is if we invest in our people again, if we create jobs through small businesses in the private sector, innovative and dynamic entrepreneurs, and ensuring that we can build durable jobs in rural Georgia, including in an agricultural economy, we will drive this state forward.
Mr. Hunt, 30 seconds for your rebuttal.
I heard you address the overall state of Georgia and how we need to turn things around, and I agree with you wholeheartedly there. But you didn't point out in any way how you're going to create jobs through better education in the near term. And I really would like to see this plan put out. It's so key and important that we must turn this around. Get rid of the poverty cycle that we have here in the state that's so ingrained. And education is one of the ways to do that. I agree.
Right. Mr. Deal, you may now ask your question of Andrew Hunt.
All right. Dr. Hunt, libertarians are fierce opponents of government spending. In our last debate, you indicated that you would expand Medicaid in the state of Georgia under Obamacare. And I understand that you've taken some $37 million in private sector grants that are funded by the taxpayers of this country to make sure your business do not go into bankruptcy. How do you reconcile those positions with your Libertarian Party's position?
Thank you. We do need to clarify these and make sure everyone understands these very well. First of all, the Georgians have paid into the federal system, and we're not getting that money back. It's hurting our economy, and one of the reasons why we're hurting in so many different ways. Do I agree with Obamacare? No. Do I want to have state rights and the 10th Amendment be the rule? Yes. And we need to get back to that. That is how and where we need to run our country. But as a republic, so each state has these programs themselves. Until we do that, we have to get our tax dollars back. We have to bring them back into the system. And these grants that my company received are the same way. These were competitive grants, not through cronyism, no lobbying. They were under scientific merit and review and are considered honor badges. So my company received many honor badges of high technical capability, and I actually have 50 patents and a PhD from Georgia Tech, and also have worked in the area of antimicrobials.
All right, Mr. Deal, rebuttal.
Well, you know, Dr. Hunt wants to expand Medicaid. He wants to expand an entitlement program. It is entitlement programs that are killing our country. Yeah, and you're wrong. We're not paying that money. We're borrowing that money primarily from the Chinese, and our children and grandchildren are going to one day have to repay it. I believe we have to be responsible about the way we spend taxpayer dollars, and I see that you have benefited from taxpayer-funded grants, and I understand your position on that. It just does not seem to me to reconcile itself with being a libertarian.
Mr. Deal, your question for Jason Carter.
Senator Carter, you've never had a leadership position in the Senate or in the delegation from DeKalb County that you are part of, and you've never had a leadership position in private business. You've never passed a bill, never offered an amendment to many of the bills you now are criticizing. Why should Georgians vote for you with this absolute lack of leadership experience?
Governor, you and I both know that what you just said is not true. There are 21 bipartisan bills that have my name on them that you signed into law. And at the same time, the attacks on my leadership, frankly, are just an attempt, I believe, to pass the buck. Because the bottom line, as we see, what we need in this state is a governor who will stand up and say, I take responsibility for the middle class, for the fact that $1,447 has been taken out of the average family's pocket during your administration. That is a number that is real and that you've disputed. But the facts will show out that everyone knows when you travel this state, the middle class is falling behind. Our education system has been undermined. We have 9,000 fewer teachers than we had several years ago. And a vision for the future is the most important thing that we can provide. And this state has languished long enough with no vision.
Mr. Deal, your rebuttal.
Senator Carter has been in the state Senate as long as I have been the governor of this state. His colleagues who know him best have never given him a position of leadership, even within his own Democrat caucus within the state Senate or within his DeKalb County delegation. He has been on bills, but he has never been the primary author of a single piece of legislation that has ever passed. He criticizes budgets that he voted for. He has never offered an amendment to change anything about the way we have funded the operations of this state.
That's simply
Jason,
false. May I respond?
No, we are out of time, and
I'm happy to ask a
we
question.
must keep it moving. Jason Carter, it is now your turn to ask Andrew Hunt a question.
Dr. Hunt, you're a scientist, and you heard the governor's report of appointing a new task force on Ebola. What are your thoughts on the governor's comments with respect to Ebola just last week?
That's a very good one. The governor actually quoted that water kills Ebola, and we cannot have our leaders making such statements and then not retracting them ever. I never saw a public retraction of this statement. That is bad. I actually have many years of working in antimicrobials, and I find it very bad that we have a leadership that would go in that direction. He's appointing a task team, but he doesn't have the capability or knowledge to understand which people have the right ways and the right ways of doing it. I can be peer on peer with the people addressing these issues, and I can talk to them and understand exactly the programs they want to put forward, and we will address it correctly, and we will put out the right warnings at the right time and the right safety measures for our state to be protected.
Mr. Carter, care to rebut?
No, I think that he's put it out well. The most important thing that we can do with respect to handling the Ebola crisis is to ensure that our public health system and our leaders have credibility. I have been and lived in Africa at times during outbreaks, and it is important more than anything else that our top leadership is communicating effectively, that our top leadership is spreading appropriate information, and I do believe that it was inappropriate last week for the governor to say that water cures Ebola.
And again, Mr. Carter, your question now for Nathan Deal.
Governor Deal, we asked our supporters on Facebook what they would like to ask you, and we got a frankly giant number of questions, as you might expect. But this question comes from my friend Robert, who's here, and here it is. It's football season. We wouldn't stand for it if our football team was getting beaten by Tennessee, Florida, Mississippi, Louisiana, South Carolina, and frankly the entire rest of the country. And being dead last with respect to unemployment, having destroyed
You're out
15
of time. Please get to your question very
The question
quickly.
is, why, that would certainly cost Mark Richter's job. Why shouldn't it cost you yours?
Well, first of all, you don't understand that unemployment numbers are outliers. The most important critical area is how many jobs have been created. We have created more jobs in all of those states that you have named, and we continue to grow. Last year, we were 6th in the nation in terms of total new jobs. We are on the right track. I think that what you're simply saying is quoting statistics that have no relevance. Even the Bureau of Labor Statistics has now indicated that they've gotten so much heat from people all across this country that they're finally going to adjust their model. We have seen them for the last 3 years estimate Georgia's unemployment rate on the high side for 3 consecutive years. The only problem is that they don't adjust it until they actually do an audit in February of the following year. I have every confidence that this next February, they're going to come back and say that our unemployment rate was not the figure that they have quoted, because it does not reconcile it, and major economists all across this country are saying it just does not make common sense.
Mr. Carter, your rebuttal.
I don't believe this is about statistics, Governor. I think that the governor cannot blame the statisticians for the fact that the middle class in this state is hurting, for the fact that there's 380-something thousand Georgians that are being left behind. I believe that we can't wait until next February to begin generating jobs, to begin bringing our state back to where it should be. We have every ingredient we need to be a powerhouse in this state, and this governor has led us to the bottom in so many ways that it is inappropriate. And I know that with a true vision that supports the middle class, and we can move our state forward.
All right, we're going to make one exception here in our rounds, and I'm going to give Nathan Deal an opportunity for a rebuttal on the Ebola question and comment that was made.
Well, we have a very competent individual, Dr. Brenda Fitzgerald, who is the head of our Department of Public Health. She admits she misinformed me as she briefed me initially, but she is a very competent individual, unlike what we are now seeing at the federal level of somebody being called an Ebola czar. She has put together a comprehensive effort to fight Ebola. She is talking with hospitals and making sure that first responders know exactly what they are working with and what they're going to encounter. And I believe I have shown responsible leadership to bring all of the public and private sectors together to make sure our state is protected.
All right.
Will you
thank
retract the statement?
That is enough.
Okay.
All right. We must move on. If you are just joining us now, this is the debate between the candidates for Georgia's governor. We will now go to our third and final round. In this round, I will ask a question submitted by the public and then turn to our panelists for questions to follow. We'll continue this cycle until we run out of time. Our first constituent question comes from Alan Wood, and I'm going to ask all of the candidates, if you will take a moment to answer the question. Yes, we're going to give you 60 seconds to answer each, and so I'll begin with Mr. Hunt, farthest away from me, and we can go down the line. This is the question for each of you to answer. If elected, will you fight for marriage equality and medical cannabis, or will you continue to support the status quo? Mr. Hunt?
I will be a strong proponent of medical cannabis. It can cure so many things. It is a natural remedy. It has fewer side effects than the expensive drugs that we're putting people on that are so addictive. This is a less addictive, better cure for so many different areas, including our veterans that are suffering from PTSD. And we need to take care of our veterans dearly. On the same-sex marriage area, this is an area that is going to be determined by the courts. It's happening right now, and I wouldn't want to waste taxpayer money trying to change laws and rules in this area when they're going that way. Personally, I believe government should be completely out of the marriage business, and each organization should decide in their own eyes who they believe is worthy of being married or not. That's the way it was in the founding of our country, and that's the kind of roots we need to return back to. Smaller government, less rules and regulations. And that way we maximize our freedoms that we should have.
Mr. Deal?
In 2004, when the people of this state voted for a constitutional amendment that said that marriage was between a man and a woman, I took an oath of office when I took the governorship to support and uphold the Constitution and the laws of this state. And that is exactly what I intend to do. With regard to medical cannabis, when the General Assembly was unable to come to an agreement last year, I entered an executive order, which has put us very far ahead of many other states. We have now cooperating through our department at Georgia Regents University, Augusta, with a private company that is doing clinical trials. We are going to be approved by the Food and Drug Administration for Georgia through our university to conduct clinical trials here in our own state. I have sympathy for these families and these individuals who are seeing children suffering with seizures. And I will work with the General Assembly, as I have done, to make sure we have a good, solid answer. But I am not going to be in a position of seeing Georgia become like Colorado.
All right. Mr. Carter?
I have spent time with the parents of children who suffer from seizure disorders and others. And last year, when we voted in the Senate to allow those law-abiding citizens and those folks who care so much about their children to have access to that cannabis oil treatments, I was proud. I was disappointed that the gridlock in the legislature prevented it from taking place, and would have liked to see better leadership at that time. But I do support that and would continue to do so, and would gladly sign legislation to that effect as governor. With respect to marriage, I believe in both religious liberty and in personal freedom, and I don't believe that anyone should tell a church or a religious organization who can be married, but I do believe that the government, when it comes to doling out rights, should do it equally. I also take an oath to the Constitution of the state of Georgia and the United States, and would certainly continue to uphold the Constitution as long as it remains valid under the law.
Mm-hmm. To our panelists, Jim Galloway, it is your turn to ask a question.
Mr. Deal, Mr. Carter has thrown suspicion on the improvement of your personal finances during your 4 years as governor, specifically citing the sale of your salvage business to a company that owes $73.8 million in state taxes. During the Republican primary, you agreed to make your recent income tax returns available for public inspection, but you have yet to do so. Do you still intend to do so, and if so, when? And let me also add that I believe Mr. Carter has made the same commitment and has not made his income tax available.
I intend to make my tax returns available as I have done previously when I ran for governor, or for many years that I made available at that time. Let me just say, though, I've seen Senator Carter's ad about my business. That is a typical illustration of the way that some liberals look at private enterprise. They have disdain for people who, like me and my partner some 25 years ago, invested by borrowing against our assets to make a business start. We worked with that business for over 2 decades, meeting weekly payrolls, something that Senator Carter has never done. And I do not agree with the proposition that the government made our business successful. I turned it over to a blind trust when I became governor. A national company wanted to buy our business, and we agreed to sell. Now, unlike the liberal context where thousands of other Georgians have built businesses from scratch just like I have, I want to tell you, it is not the government that made us successful. It was those of us who worked to make our company successful.
Mr. Carter, I'm going to give you a chance for rebuttal.
This exact business is the business that Governor Deal was using his position in Congress to make better. He was run out of Congress to avoid an ethics scandal. It is a pattern. It is a practice. And the taxpayers have been on the hook now for Governor Deal's ethics scandals repeatedly. In fact, there's $3 million that are coming out of our pockets to deal with this governor's cover-up of prior issues. And I'll tell you, when I think about these facts that we see, I think we deserve a little more of a response than liberal name-calling.
All right. Senator Parrish, your next question. I'm going to let you respond, Mr. Deal. Yes.
Now?
Yes, I'll give you 30
good.
seconds.
Well, first of all, with regard to any taxes that may be owed by that company that bought our business, I've instructed the Department of Revenue to let a neutral judge make a determination of that, and I pledge that we will collect every cent that they owe, if in fact they do owe any taxes. Now, the allegations about ethics charges is something that Senator Carter has continued to relate to. He ought to know that over 2 years ago, the Ethics Commission heard the charges against me, and they dismissed them as being of no merit whatsoever, just as the charge against him has been dismissed as well.
All right, we're out of time on that question. Senator Parrish, your question.
Mr. Deal, speaking of ethics, 2 years ago, Georgia ranked 50th in an ethics investigation by the Center for Public Integrity. Since the legislature passed the ethics reform package last year, do you think that ranking would be higher now?
Well, I would hope that it would. We have not only reformed the ethics rules, especially tightening them down, and I think it has greatly improved our status in our state in terms of ratings, but we have, in my administration, put almost $250,000 of new money into the Ethics Commission to be able to update their computer system, to be able to give them the authority to promulgate rules and regulations. It should not take anybody 2.5 years to determine that a case against a candidate has no valid merit whatsoever, as was the case with me. I want to make sure that we have reforms. That's why I have recommended that we make reforms next year to include all 3 branches of government making equal appointments to an ethics commission. The debate about the misfunctioning of that commission has been primarily the inability of staff to coordinate their activities. If we have independent members of the commission who do not vote on charges that come against individuals from the sectum of government that has appointed them, we will remove any doubt about any conflict of interest.
All right, we are out of time on that question. Another question from the public. This is from Ashley McDonald. In regards, and this is for all of you, gentlemen, we'll start with Jason Carter and go down the line. In regards to the Affordable Health Care Act, how do you plan to help middle-class families who make too much money to qualify for assistance, yet who struggle trying to pay for health care? Mr. Carter?
Right now, the federal government has $36 billion of our money, and the governor has fought for the federal government to keep that money. That doesn't make sense for our people. It doesn't make sense for the 600,000 Georgians who would have health care if not for this governor's decision. It doesn't make sense for our economy. There are 35,000 jobs that would come in our health care sector if we took the federal dollars that are ours, and Georgia gets its fair share, and brought it here to do work. That's what looking for solutions looks like. The governor has played Washington politics repeatedly on this issue. He has decided to bring his experience in Congress here and say the most important thing is partisanship. I believe we have to solve problems. Our rural hospitals are in a crisis. There are 5 that have closed on Governor Deal's watch, and there are 16 more that are on the verge of bankruptcy. We must charge forward on this issue, and as governor, I will do that, looking for answers and ensuring that Georgia gets its fair share and helps its economy and helps those middle-class families who are looking for health care options.
Mr. Deal?
Well, first of all, I think you should know the fact that Georgia taxpayers, on average, spend about $2,300 a year in supporting the current Medicaid program at both the state and federal level. And if we expand it, it's going to cost about $2.5 billion over the next 10 years. I just simply don't think we can afford to do that. It's not money that we have paid in. Some of it may be, but most of it is money the federal government doesn't have, and they're having to borrow it. Now, we have paid some $351.5 million in this year's budget just to come into compliance at the state level with the Affordable Care Act. That is $351.5 million we could have put in things like education, because we already had our people insured. And it's going to cost even more in the years to come. I think we have to be responsible with taxpayers' money. I think we have to make sure we do what I did with an executive order with regard to rural hospitals. Allow them to cut back to the services they can provide and not lose their certificate of need should they decide to do that.
We're out of time. Mr. Hunt?
We have a major health crisis where most people can't afford to get quality service. And the problem is the rules and regulations that are there. Number one, we need tort reform. We must get down the legal costs that is costing our medical providers so much. And neither of the attorneys that are running against me will bring that. I will make sure that we get tort reform and reduce about 20% of our medical costs just through this one avenue alone. We must also have a free enterprise system where people aren't forced to buy insurance, but instead can go into direct relationship with doctors through medical co-ops and other systems that have been proven in some other states to reduce the cost in half or even 60% reductions in costs and give better service. That's what we need, is free enterprise-based solutions, less regulations, and definitely tighten down on the lawyers that are actually in your insurance policy. Every time you pay health insurance, you're paying a lawyer.
All right, we go back to our panel. I believe I skipped Christopher King, so we'll pick up there.
Okay. My question relates to jobs and unemployment. Each of the candidates have have talked about it a little bit before, and this question is for all of the candidates. Of course, as you all mentioned, Georgia ranks 6th in the nation for job growth, according to the the State Bureau of Labor Statistics. But it still has the highest unemployment rate in the country. The same state Labor Department puts the jobless rate at 7.9%. The Federal Bureau of Labor Statistics puts it at 8.1%. Either way, that's still much higher than the national average of 6.2%. What would you do to reduce unemployment and create not just low-paying jobs, but well-paying jobs? Mr. Hunt.
Well, I would definitely invoke my Job Powerhouse program. We can actually drive, within my term, if you elect me into office, unemployment rates less than 5%, and that's what we need. The better in job environment, the higher the pay. There's more competition. Also, it would be done in such a way that only full-time jobs paying $11 an hour or more are rewarded. And what is it? It's for every town, every city. We have 2 of the highest poverty cities in the whole nation here in our state. They don't get any of the current programs that go to these major multi-billion-dollar corporations that can afford the lobbying and that have paid for the tens of millions of ads that you see my opponents running. You can make a choice on what you want. Do you want to give in to this, or do you want a real system that's going to address jobs quickly and fastly, a free enterprise-based system where the government doesn't choose the winners and losers any longer? You get to, by who you get your services from, and we'll have great jobs.
All right. Jim Galloway?
This question is for all three gentlemen, and we will start with Mr. Hunt because he's a Georgia Tech man.
Okay.
In 2003, the legislature passed a measure permitting public universities to pursue civil damages against individuals who entice amateur scholarship athletes to violate NCAA rules. Should the state of Georgia take the next step and criminalize this activity? Mr. Hunt.
Well, that's an excellent question, and I guess what you have to look at is maybe we're doing too many regulations in here. Maybe you should actually allow a little bit of money to come to these impoverished players that are suffering so much under the current ways. Let's rethink the whole thing. Let's make it that we have the maximum liberty and opportunity for people. Let's have it that they can make a reasonable amount of money where they're not having to do things that would violate it because they can't even get by. We need to have it that all the people have the right way forward. And we need to clean up our sports, but we need to have a system that's fair to the player as well as it is to the college. The colleges are getting all the money, the glorious stadiums and everything else. And the donors are putting a lot of money into the football programs. I'd like to see those donors put it into education. I would like to inspire that because that's where we need to put our money is in education. And then have it that the players can get some money, and then we'll have a much better system.
All right. Mr. Deal?
Well, first of all, perhaps we should see more enforcement of the law that we currently have that appears not to be effective. I think more importantly than anything else, though, is that we need to see some fairness in the NCAA. We need to see players being treated equally for the same kinds of accusations. The state of Georgia at the University of Georgia, I think, is trying to play by the rules, but we're seeing other stadiums across the country playing individuals who maybe have done the very same thing that one of our players is alleged to do. It is a serious problem. I think it requires that everybody be treated fairly and equitably, including the players and the families as well as the schools. Now, this is certainly something that I think we have to be very cautious about legislating on. This has always been within the province of the private sector, those who regulate athletic activities in our colleges and universities. But I do believe that with enough public pressure, we can change their attitude to make sure that our people, including Todd Gurley, are treated with the same degree of fairness that other athletes are being treated.
Mr. Carter?
I think you've got a lot of Georgia fans up here, at least two. But I'll tell you, the short answer to your question is yes. I think that the folks that are out there preying on these athletes and making money off of them should be punished. But I'll tell you what I think about when we look at and consider what's happening at the University of Georgia. And it's that we have undermined our public institutions of higher education so much over the last several years, it's unbelievable. The cost of college in this state is rising faster than in any other state but one. In fact, that's just another way in which Georgia has reached the bottom. I believe we have to ensure that we're making education our first priority every single year, not just in an election year. And I believe that if we do that, we can control the cost of college, we can expand the Hope Scholarship to ensure that middle-class families are able to maximize their access to college. And right now, I think when we look at the University of Georgia and how excited we are about our football team, we also want to be excited about the dynamic nature of our higher institutions of higher education and their ability and folks' ability to afford to go.
We're at time.
Thank you.
Sandra Parrish?
This question is for Mr. Carter. Recently, the mayor of Houston asked pastors to turn over sermons in light of an anti-discrimination policy passed by the city's government. That's now been amended to all speeches rather than sermons. Do you support anti-discrimination laws over the right to free speech?
I believe that free speech is important. I believe that the government cannot legislate within that spectrum. And I do believe that there is certain types of hate crimes that rise to the level of being more than just speech. But as a general matter, no, I would not support the type of legislation that would restrict people's rights to freedom of speech. It's one of the fundamental core values that we have, and I believe that we can strike the appropriate balance with respect to hate crimes. But otherwise, I think we have to allow people to move forward and to be free to speak as they wish.
All right. Would you want to hear a response from the other candidates?
Sure. Governor Dale, how do you feel about that?
Well, I think that's one thing that Senator Carter and I can probably agree on. I think you have to be very, very careful when you start intruding into First Amendment free speech rights. To try to legislate in that arena is awfully dangerous because you never know what the unintended consequences might be. I don't support anyone using their right of free speech to do damage or harm to any individual. But it is not the province of government to try to regulate and contain that, except when you cry fire in a crowded theater, which our courts have said that's when you have crossed the line. Those kinds of extreme situations that jeopardize the health and the safety of other individuals, those have generally been the guidelines within which we have allowed statutory intervention to occur. And I believe that is a pretty good example of where we need to draw the line. We don't simply need to react to every particular popular opinion that comes along and try to embody it in legislation.
Mr. Hunt?
Well, I'll have to say that we've had two excellent answers so far. But what I'm going to address now is that I am a strong constitutionalist, the way it was written, and not the way it is a living document that they reinterpret over the years. So I am very strong on the First Amendment, but all of the amendments too. And we are having our liberties and rights taken from us. Every law that's passed is taking more of our freedoms away from us. We have too many lawmakers, and we need more law erasers. That's what we need to have in our country, and that's what we need to have in our state. If I'm governor, what I'd like to see, if you're going to pass a new law, I'd like to see where you sit down and have to scratch off 3 or 4 off the book at the same time that new one comes on. That's the way we're going to have the maximum freedom and liberty. Yes, we don't want to hurt other people, and that's the edge of liberty, when you're inflicting danger or harm on other people. And so that is a line we have to maintain.
All right, thank you. Christopher King, your question.
Yes, this question is for all the candidates. It's on K through 12 education. The state budget for K through 12 education is about $8 billion, an increase of about $500 million. But according to the Georgia Budget and Policy Institute, the state would need at least another $700 million to fully fund the schools to account for increased enrollment, teacher raises, and meet the state's own education standards. Would you increase funding for the schools, and by how much? We'll start with Mr. Deal.
Well, first of all, let me point out that the quality basic education formula that's been in place since 1985 has never been fully funded. Now, what I have done in my 4 budgets is to appropriate a greater percentage of the general state revenue for K through 12 education than any governor since Carl Sanders was governor back in the early 60s. That is in 50 years. And this year, the largest single appropriation, as our economy was rebounding, was in this year's budget, some $535 million additional dollars. My colleague here, Senator Carter, saw fit to vote against that. Now, I have also indicated that I will put in place individuals who will come together and study our funding as well as our delivery mechanisms. It is time we revisited QBE and make it more appropriately allocated to the needs of today's education system. We have already brought on board one of the best local school superintendents. He is working in the Office of Planning and Budget under my office, and that is his primary function.
Mr.
We
Carter?
will continue that.
Governor Deal has to look back until the 1960s to justify his education policy. We need to fund our education system for this century, not last century. And what you have seen in our state is the worst underfunding and the worst contraction of public education in the history of our state. Teachers are suffering and students are suffering, and our state's economy, the very foundation of it, which is built on the education system, is crumbling. That's how we end up with the kind of skills gaps that we have now. There are 9,000 fewer teachers today than there were when the governor took over. 2/3 of our school districts have had to cut instructional days. We are not doing the job at the state level that we need to be. And not only that, but when the governor's budgets have passed, because of his cuts, 91 school districts have raised your property taxes. Under his government, we're getting less educating and more taxes. And nobody wants that. I have a plan to change the way we do the education budget. It would create a separate budget with political accountability for the politicians in Atlanta.
All right. Mr. Deal, you have 30 seconds to rebut.
Mine?
Yes, you have 30 seconds to
Well,
rebut.
first of all, you know, if you really do support public education, you should have voted for the largest increase in K through 12 funding in 7 years, this year's budget, which you voted against. The statistics that you cite are just totally inaccurate. I'm not reaching back to the 60s. I'm saying that as a proportion of state revenue, we have had the 4 highest years of a percentage since any governor some 50 years ago. And you say you support education, but your votes don't support that. You are in a distinct minority in voting against this budget. Every Democrat in the House voted for it. You are one of only 5 in the Senate. 2/3 of your own Democrat colleagues in the Senate voted for this budget.
All right, Mr. Carter, a rebuttal. This is the last rebuttal before we move on to Andrew Hunt to answer the question.
Governor Deal, you know and I know that my record in the Senate is clear on public education funding. You have underfunded it this year by $750 million. I could not vote for that. The budgeting process is utterly broken, and I'm the only candidate in this race who has a plan to fix it. And the bottom line is this. You can throw statistics out over and over again, but walk into your local schools at home. Walk into the schools that have 26 kids in their kindergarten class. Ask a teacher. No one in this state believes that we're properly funding education. I don't even think Governor Deal believes that.
All right, time. Mr. Hunt?
Our education system is completely broken. The U.S. spends more per student on education than any other nation in the world, yet we rank 25th. We need to look at how these better countries are doing it less expensively than us. We don't have to increase the budget. We have to do better. We have to redo it. We need school choice. We need educational savings accounts where the money follows the child. Take the state and federal money and let the parents choose what's the best for the education of the child. Let's have it that we have a variety of school types. Let's have it that we have blended schools, STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics schools, vocational schools, a range of different educational types. Let's bring it into early childhood education, and let's support hope all the way through the end. If there's one way to end the cycle of poverty we have, it's education, and we're not taking it seriously. Some people say they want more charter schools, but in this year's budget, they only put a $250,000 increase in that budget versus hundreds of millions for the other schools.
All right, a question from the public again, and this is picking up on a question previously asked by our panelist Christopher King on employment. And this is directed specifically to Mr. Deal. This is from Sharnae Haywood of Athens. Governor Nathan Deal, in the previous debate, I was taken aback by your comment, people who work are better than people who don't work, because there are so many in our state still looking for jobs. As a student at the University of Georgia, I worry about getting a job after graduation. While your ads parade Georgia being the #1 state to do business, it is hard to ignore Georgia also leads the nation in its rate of unemployment. It is safe to say you inherited a failing economy, but so did the president and 49 other governors. Why is Georgia, under your leadership, lagging behind the rest of the nation in its rate of unemployment?
Well, first of all, as I said, unemployment rates are only good for political advertising as a general rule. Economists don't pay any attention to them. Businesses don't pay attention to them. They look at job growth. And right there in Athens, Georgia, where this questioner comes from, we have a great example of our economic development. Caterpillar brought a plant from Japan back to the mainland, and they came right here to the state of Georgia, and they're creating hundreds of jobs. That has been our focus. We have eliminated the marriage tax penalty on working couples. We've eliminated the estate tax so that businesses can be passed from one generation without undue taxes from our state. We have focused on job creation. We eliminated the sales tax on energy so that manufacturers could grow. And we have seen that growth from the Caterpillar plant to Baxter, which is making a $1 billion capital investment here east of Atlanta. Will be the largest single capital investment in this state's history since Kia came in 2006. We are making substantial strides. Job creation is what is important for those who are in college looking for jobs.
We're going to have to call time. That question was directed specifically to you, Mr. Deal, so we'll pick back up with our panel and Jim Galloway.
Well, I don't want to seem like I'm beating up Mr. Deal, but this question is for him, but I'd also like to hear the other two candidates on this. Today, for the first time in state history, voters in Georgia cast ballots on a Sunday. Many will do so again next Sunday. Mr. Deal, you have said you would be open to legislation that would close down Sunday voting. Could you please explain your position?
Well, I think that the voting policies of our state ought to be uniform. You should not have one county having a voting pattern that is different from other counties. I think that is what the General Assembly will look at. If they decide that all counties would be allowed to have Sunday voting, then that's fine with me. As my wife Sandra says, Republicans can vote on Sundays too, just as long as they go to church first. I think we'll listen to the General Assembly. We'll see the results of Sunday voting and what effect it has had on voter turnout. I think all of us want to see as many people as possible who are registered and qualified to turn out and vote. And I think we should do whatever is important in order to turn out the voters. And on that note, I would encourage everybody who's watching at home tonight, be sure you either early vote or that you vote on November the 4th.
All right, Andrew Hunt.
We have to open up voting as much as we can. We're at historically low rates of voting, and it's real simple. The majority of the people are dissatisfied with the two major parties. You have a reason to go vote this year. You have a third choice. Don't stay at home, because then you're acquiescing that government is okay and it's all right. Sitting at home is not a protest. You need to go and vote. And we want to make it easy for people to register, but we want valid voters. And we want to know that there's a trail that we can look at and see that your vote counted and can be recounted if it has to be. Our current electronic machines cannot provide that record. We need to have a printed written record also of every person's vote. So if we need to, we can go back and verify. Or some of the current electronic type of verifications like we have for our monetary transactions. These type of verifications do not exist with our current electronic voting machines, and it is a shame that we don't have such an honorable system.
All right, Jason Carter.
I'm glad that Governor Deal has changed his position with respect to the fairness of Sunday voting. As we all know, right now, any county in the state who wants to vote on Sunday is allowed to do so. I think it's fantastic. I think it helps people get engaged, and it certainly helps working people get to the polls, because they don't have to take time off jobs or find childcare on Election Day. So I've always been in favor of expanding the right to vote, ensuring that we have a fair system that both counts every vote, that registers every voter who's qualified, and that ensures that every registered voter is permitted to cast their ballot. And I think making it as convenient as possible helps us all.
All right. We have time for one more question from our panelists. This is a question that either is directed to one candidate for 60 seconds in reply, or all the candidates, who each will get 30 seconds. So, Sandra, you get the last question.
And this is directed to Mr. Deal, but the other two can feel free if they want to chime in. When the legislature passed its gun legislation this year, allowing carry permit holders to bring their firearms to more places, including churches that opt in, a provision dealing with churches that operate schools was left out. Do you support allowing guns in churches on Sundays, where school is held during the week, as long as the churches opt in?
We're going to give everyone 30 seconds. Let me just be clear. We're going to give everyone 30 seconds to reply, since we're still on the clock. And we'll start with you, Mr. Deal, and then we'll go to Jason Carter and then Mr. Hunt.
Well, I believe the beauty of the bill that passed this last year was that we gave churches the choice. I think that is always a better option rather than the state dictating to them. And I trust congregations, and I trust the leaders of the churches to make those kind of judgment calls. I think that we have given them that flexibility, and I feel sure that they will exercise it appropriately.
All right. Mr. Carter?
I agree with Governor Deal that it's important to give local communities and congregations a choice in this matter. And I fought very hard with respect to this bill and brought people together from both sides of the aisle to ensure that the choice that the churches were given was a real one. And that's the kind of leadership that I provide, bringing people together on very difficult issues that are polarizing in this state.
All right. And Mr. Hunt?
I'm a strong constitutionalist, and so I support gun rights, but I also support the rights of private landowners, whether they're individual or organizations. Each entity should be able to determine what is allowed on their property or not. Government shouldn't be saying you have to be able to allow this activity on your property. It's your property. You get to decide. But also, government shouldn't say you can't do this on your property unless it's hurting other people in surrounding properties. That's liberty.
All right. That is all the time that we have for questions. The candidates will now have 60 seconds for a closing statement. And by random selection, Jason Carter makes the first closing statement. Mr. Carter?
Thank you so much for spending your time and watching this debate tonight. I believe that this state has everything it needs to be an absolute powerhouse. If we put our minds to it in this state, if we educate our people and invest in them, if we open up the doors to our technical colleges and colleges to give people the skills that they need for the future, if we invest and pay attention to the middle class and to the small businesses of this state, we will have the ability to have a dynamic, growing, forward-looking economy that innovates, that expands for the future. Right now, we're not getting that economy. Right now, people are getting left behind and our education system is languishing. But we can, if we put our minds to it, succeed. I ask for your vote. I ask for your vote for the future of this state, and I would be honored to serve as your governor.
Nathan Deal.
Well, thank you for listening today. I am honored to have served as your governor for these last 4 years, and I ask for your vote so that I can do so for another 4 years. We have put in place many reforms that are bringing our state forward. We are growing jobs at a faster rate than the national growth average for our country, and we're going to continue to see that grow. We're putting money into our K-12 system, into our technical colleges, into our colleges and universities, and we did so this year because our policies of job growth were working and our revenue was growing. We've also made reforms in our criminal justice system, something we haven't had a chance to talk about tonight. It is truly revolutionary. We will lead the country. We already lead the country in terms of drug courts, and we've been recognized as such. We are saving millions of dollars, and we're also saving lives. We have seen our African-American population in our prison system drop by about 20%. We are going to break the cycle of crime by educating those who have no skills so that when they get out, they will not commit crimes again. Thank you.
Mr. Hunt.
David Pennington and many other people have endorsed me because I am the only one that'll cut taxes. I'm the only one that will do tort reform. I am the one that will bring cost-effective solutions and freedom and fairness for all of us. It's a very, very night and day choice here. I am very different. I'm a small businessman, a PhD in engineering. I want to have about 50 patents, and I want to put all that to work for you. I want to work for you, the people. Bring government back to be for the people. And that way, we can have a better way forward. I have 1% or less of the money they do. You're going to be seeing lots of ads run by them. We have the views of who they've been supported by, the special interest groups that paid for the tens of millions of ads. You have to, if you want to support me, talk to other people. If you just vote for me, that's great, but I'm asking for more. I'm asking for you to get out and tell other people and tell them to hunt for Hunt on the ballot.
Thank you so much. Our thanks to the candidates here this evening and to our panel of distinguished journalists. Thank you so very much. We'd also like to thank the Atlanta Press Club